Hey guys, once in a while I make a video about topics that are, or at least should be, interesting to most of my viewers. This video is about such a topic, but it is about all the things that are necessary to even start practicing towards stream entry or the right view, which should be the goal for every serious spiritual or at least Buddhist practitioner. Believe it or not, the Buddha did talk quite a bit about a list of things that are necessary to even start transcending the state of an unenlightened person and start seeing the Dhamma. Today is all about those things that you should bring to the table if your goal is stream entry or the right view. But before we start with anything else, what is the actual problem? We surely know that many things and behaviors that we do or engage in are bad for us, yet we still do those things and cannot seem to stop. This is often true for addictions, unhealthy eating habits, for example, exercise, and also for meditation and Dhamma practice in general. We know, well, at least intellectually, that those things are, well, not, or at least are beneficial in the case of lifting or something like that, or at least some of us do, yet it is very hard to actually follow through and start doing those things on a consistent basis. So what is the problem here? What is the actual hindrance we are facing? Let us start with a short sutta citation that should illustrate the point, well, at least on the level of gut feeling where it matters. And the Buddha said, for example, in Majjhima Nikaya number 105, that uninterested worldlings or puthujjanas have a certain problem. And he said, when a person is intent on worldly material things, only talk concerning that interests him, and his thinking and pondering are in line with that, and he associates with that kind of person. But when the talk about Dhamma is going on, he will not listen to it, or give it an ear, or exert his mind to understand. So what we can get from that citation is actually quite simple. When we have not seen the drawbacks of what we are engaging in, namely all the sensuality and all the worldly material things, then we will very likely not listen to anything else. We need a reason to actually start looking for the Dhamma. And, well, at least most people need a reason. Some people can start without, but the vast majority of people actually need some kind of divine messenger event. And as you can see, we might know something intellectually, but that is not where things matter. Ultimately, humans are feeling-based creatures, and what we do pretty much always decides how we feel as a default. Let's put it like that. The Buddha even said that the entire experience converges upon the point of feeling. When we deem something as good, we go for it. When we deem something as bad, we try to avoid it by all costs. And when something bores us, we try to, well, distract ourselves by whatever means possible. And if we want to do something different, we have to train ourselves to be able to do that. And I really want to emphasize here that it is a training. It is not something that we do as a matter of willpower or anything like that. We have to train ourselves over an often very gradual, long process to escape our previous habits and behaviors. In fact, sensuality and the urge to follow our primal desires are self-reinforcing. On the surface level, it just seems to work, and to a degree, it really does. So when we go for sensuality, it really does stop our pain to some degree. But it comes at the cost of worse pains and worse sufferings in the future. Yet on a more fundamental and long-term level, the entire approach is doomed to fail. So we have to be very careful with sensuality, and since it is really flawed, it really is flawed, so we can understand it as really flawed, and when the mind understands that deeply, then it will stop going for it. But until then, we have to train it and tame the mind so it stops going for all that. Yet we cannot see that immediately, and it requires a lot of training to actually confirm this truth in our experience where it matters. In fact, you have to go against pretty much everything that you deem agreeable for a very long time before that confirmation comes. You have to go against the stream of the world, like the suttas say, and need a very good reason for that. And what are those reasons? Well, there's actually one trigger that the Buddha mentioned, namely the divine messenger event. In short, a divine messenger is simply one tragic event that shows you that whatever you did before cannot fix certain things. No matter how hard you try, you cannot override or cover up certain kinds of suffering by indulging in sensuality. No amount of drugs or sweets or alcohol will cure your bad health, make you young again, or bring deceased loved ones back, or even fix your deadly disease or anything like that. And upon realizing that, there are only two options, according to the Buddha: madness or noble search. He also sorted people into different categories based on how close to home such events have to happen. And one type of person is already stirred up by strangers suffering, another needs acquaintances, relatives, or even himself. And then there are people who never get it. And those are sadly most people, or some people who need no event at all. Those are super rare, but they were also mentioned in at least one sutta. And now to the Buddha's actual formulation in the suttas when it comes to the topic of today's video, namely the mundane right view. And he said, therein, monks, right view comes first. And what makes it a right view? Right view, I say, is twofold. There is a right view that is affected by taints, and there is a right view that is noble and world transcending. And what makes it mundane right view? Well, there is what is given, what is offered, and what is sacrificed. There is fruit and result of good and bad actions. There is this world and the other world. There is mother and father. There are beings who are reborn spontaneously. There are in the world good and virtuous recluses and Brahmins who have realized for themselves by direct knowledge and declare this world and the other world. And this is from Jhimma Nikaya number 117, where the Buddha discusses the mundane right view or right view overall. It is not just the mundane kind, it's both kinds. But we want to focus on the mundane kind, as that is very necessary to even start practicing towards the Dhamma. Now in that statement, we have several things to analyze and a few things that are implicit in it. So we need some context knowledge about the circumstances that were prevalent in ancient India to understand. First, we kind of have to accept, and this is one of the initial statements, that our own views and ideas might be wrong, or at least not perfectly correct. This requires some degree of humility, or however that is called. And if we look back upon our own choices, as an example, we will notice that we refine our views all the time, and there's no reason to assume that this time is different, that this time we are completely right. Only based on that can we look for our own sources of truth, for other sources of truth, for example, the Buddha, or one of his disciples, or his Dhamma. And as long as we are still subject to suffering, we are at least wrong to some extent. That is something that we have to face at some point in time, that our current views and knowledges are not perfect. And that is very important. Otherwise, we will never start looking for an alternative. If we always think we are right, then why search for anything different? Well, thus, we need the first thing, which is faith. Based on believing that we might be wrong, we must at least delay our disbelief that everyone is wrong and must look for someone who knows better. That one could be the Buddha, the Dhamma, or any part of the noble Sangha. At least for a time, we must accept that they know better and that there is something to learn, something to attain. Otherwise, we would never start doing the training that the Buddha described, because it is very, very hard to do. In fact, he even said that it is the hardest thing to do, and the results are kind of delayed. So there's no direct relationship between the actions you do, the training you do, and the result, and we cannot even predict when they will come. And we also need to associate with good people and hear the good Dhamma from them. Otherwise, there is really no growth. They kind of plant the seeds, and we have to prepare the groundwork. And next, we need something very mundane, where the Buddha said that it connects the uninstructed worldling and the arahant. And it is simply discipline or patience, or in his words, diligent effort. This is the link that connects this noble person and the uninterested worldling. It is not some divine event or something mystical. It is simply diligent effort. That is what is necessary. Without diligent effort, nothing will happen. Without trying really hard, you will simply not end up at the Dhamma. The Buddha described a training that you must do, and not something that you learn on an intellectual level or any special experience. He even said that it is among the hardest things that you can ever do, and that requires an enormous ability to delay gratification, as the nice results of the Dhamma will only really start showing later down the line, and there is no clear information when all that will happen. So you really need faith, otherwise you will not do it. It would really take a madman to repeat something so often that it brings no apparent results. And the next step might be optional for some people, but it is a very popular wrong view. As the Buddha also teaches non-self, people tend to enter a fatalistic mindset where nothing matters and it is hard to practice. They believe that when there is no self, nothing matters, nothing can be attained. Yet, the Dhammapada says otherwise. In Dhammapada verse 165, it says, By oneself is evil done, by oneself is one defiled. By oneself is evil left undone, by oneself is one made pure. Purity and impurity depend on oneself. No one can purify another. There is a result of actions and choices, and the self chooses. Self is always a conditional, according to the Buddha. With ignorance as a condition, there is self, there is suffering, there are all the other things down the line of the chain of dependent origination. But without ignorance, those things fade away. This is why so many people are so confused. There is self right now for the vast majority of people, but it tends to fade away when you do the right training. And with the fading of the self, there is also the fading of the suffering. In the end, it is all about suffering. There's no question about it in the suttas. And the fading of the self is a necessary step or a byproduct. Yet at the beginning, you have to take responsibility for your own actions and in a sense even affirm the self to some degree. You cannot deny it. It will not vanish because you just say, yeah, there is no self, there is no self. There clearly is, with the right conditions. When those conditions are no longer there, the self stops being there. Well, further, there is mother and father. There is this world and the next one, and many other things. That is more or less an acceptance of the Buddha's teachings as true for now. The world as it is, and there should be no attempt to try and avoid it via, well, for example, scientific worldviews or something else. You cannot just say, yeah, okay, well, I can clearly see my mother and everything around me, but in reality, everything is just a particle cloud, so it does not matter. This is a quite popular cope, at least when it comes to modern views. And people try to, well, calm themselves when it comes to suffering. They kind of use those things as a cope, and that's not very, very healthy thing. And even if everyone is ultimately just made up of particles, suffering is still a very real problem. It is very much detrimental to use such views as a cope, and I would very much advise against this. So it's good to accept this world as it is, as you experience it, because experience is in the end everything we have, and it's good to see it like that. We have just the 5 aggregates available to us. Just the 5 aggregates are everything that we could ever experience. Everything is contained within them. And in them, there is mother, there is father, and all the other things. And the mundane right view removes all the impediments that hinder you from doing the actual work. The Buddha described a training that must be done for a very long time without seeing many results. That is only possible if certain conditions are met. Based on that, there are 3 general inclinations you can leverage to progress, and those are faith, wisdom, and concentration, or simply samadhi. And all of this leads to the ability to put your attention on the right things. Without that, the words of the Buddha, or any noble one, are like great seeds put on the concrete ground. The problem is not a lack of knowledge, but a lack of right preparation, a lack of training. The Dhamma can only find footing in a mind that is well prepared. It is our own wrong views and conceits that hinder us the most, and no one can externally remove those. Other people, and even the Buddha himself, can just make suggestions to us that we can or cannot follow. If we do not follow it, if the Buddha points the way, then we will not end up at the goal that he described. He can only show us the way. And the same is true for any noble person that has understood the Dhamma. He can show you and hint at you where you must go, but if you don't do it, then you will never even get the results. In the end, it all boils down to us and the choices we make. It is ourselves that liberate ourselves. But anyway, let us now come to the most important point. First, certain views and behaviors block all progress on the path. Without the mundane right view, you cannot even start practicing rightly, because you are convinced that you are right, as an example, or there are other views that block your progress and hinder you from actually putting those actions into practice or those ideas into practice that are beneficial. The Dhamma actually starts with stream entry or the right view, and stream entry needs the mundane right view first. Otherwise, even virtue would not be possible. And when you cannot practice virtue, then there is absolutely no amount of words of the Buddha that could land on the concrete ground that you have prepared for those seeds of Dhamma to grow. So what you need is faith, self-honesty, responsibility, discipline, and you have to avoid many, many wrong views. And based on that, the understanding of Dhamma can happen. But it is not something that you actively do. It is something that kind of spontaneously happens. It's not a divine gift. It is very much the result of your work, but it is not something that you do actively either, and that's very important to keep in mind. But anyway, this should be enough for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy what I do, feel free to like and subscribe and do all the other YouTube things. Until then, I wish you a pleasant day and goodbye.